I'm Liz Enns. I'm an artist and educator based in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm the guest curator for MATRICULTURE. The selection of the artists in MATRICULTURE, I was trying to make a constellation of ideas about care and relationships to materials, but also how those materials have an effect or are seen out in the world. The process of making textiles is about collaboration. Oftentimes, textiles are created by multiple people collectively. A rope is a great example of many small strands coming together. Individually, any of those threads might be weak. Together, they can support a great weight. Through braided steel sculptures, music, and animation, Nadia Nazar considers the relationship to her mother, grandmothers, and her motherland, softening steel to transform it into coastlines, hair, and collective song. Nazar's work orients us towards our position on the planet, both inside and outside of the gallery. Devin Harkleroad uses the language of the curtain, something that hangs between the public and private threshold, to reference five specific windows that hold both personal and political significance to the topic of her reproductive labor. Her symbolic and potent use of natural materials and labor intensive processes serve as exercises in challenging the exploitation of reproductive labor. When systems fail us, we must invent the worlds that we long for by reclaiming material knowledges and spiritual technologies for subversion, transformation, and self determined flourishing. Each artist's work becomes a spell for creating transgressive spaces that trouble the boundary between compassion and resistance.
My name is Devin Harkleroad. I am an artist and educator, and I live and work in Richmond, Virginia. My work for matriculture is a meditation on and rejection of oppressive systems scaffolded by the exploitation of reproductive labor. To demonstrate this, I've made 5 curtains that correspond to specific spaces significant to reproductive labor. The work utilizes the language of a curtain, something that hangs between the public and private threshold, to consider the slippage between boundaries, such as the personal and political, and pain as a transgression between the outside and in. When making the curtains, I engage in reproductive exercises as a means of healing and alternative mothering. These exercises produce the materials of the work: natural dyed silk, fermented SCOBY leather, reproductions of children's drawings, and composted silk. I use silk because of its relationship to care. To make silk, you first need to nurture and mother a silkworm. I have natural dyed all the silk from matriculture, and I choose dyes based on their material histories, potential relationship to the referring window, the aesthetics of looking like a clot, a cramp, or a bruise, and the potential healing or poisonous properties of the dye. For example, the window of the Supreme Court is dyed with madder and calendula, and then it's over-dyed with pokeberry and modified with iron. When I dye with madder, it is to heal. Madder is deeply connected to labor histories, being a major component of the Silk Road and the East India Company. Madder root also has anti-inflammatory properties and is often used to soothe menstrual cramps. I also use calendula to heal. Calendula is an herb that is widely used for anti-inflammatory and antispasmodic properties. It is brewed in teas or distilled into tinctures to relieve the pain of cramps. When I dye with pokeberry, it is to poison. Pokeweed is a native plant to most states in the U.S. Its flowers contain fuchsia berries and are poisonous to eat. And when I modify dyes with iron, it's always to bleed. Another material quilted into the curtains is SCOBY leather. SCOBY leather is made through fermentation, a process in which something slowly bubbles and breaks down into something new. For the project, I built a SCOBY farm. I had several tubs filled with a mother SCOBY and sweet tea. Given the right environment, which is essentially a womb-like space, the mother will grow to fill the tub and produce babies. To care for the SCOBY babies, I would feed, burp, and massage them. When the babies became an inch thick, I'd pull them from their wombs to dry in the sun, and during this process, I embedded drawings into the leathers. These drawings are reproductions of drawings that were gifted to me from students during my time working at a Reggio Emilia school. I painstakingly reproduced the drawings, taking time to exact line width and proportion, and by doing this, I spent a lot of time with them, allowing myself to learn from my students in an effort to reverse a child-adult hierarchy. One of my objectives while making this body of work was to consider motherhood as an expansive realm, first through the dispossessed cramp, and I define the dispossessed cramp as the pain of a contraction, the stuff of biological reproduction, extracted from the uterus. A cramp or contraction also triggers pain, and for matriculture, the work represents the pain of a cramp as a metaphor for the denial of reproductive justice and the boundaries, legislation, and cultural norms that persist to exploit reproductive labor. The windows I chose because of their relationship to my experiences with reproductive labors and their larger connection to political systems. The windows where my son will sleep matches the windows in my son's nursery, who is labored out 7 weeks early during the making of this project. I chose these windows because giving birth is tainted by the legislation and cultural norms that politicize the process. My pregnancy, birth story, and NICU bill triggers both traditional motherhood and the complications of having a child in an unsupportive political system. The window here in a garden city matches the windows of Tefra. I wanted to make a curtain for Tefra's windows because I was laboring for the exhibition, but also because of Reston's relationship to the Garden City movement, which is a utopian pro-worker experiment in urban planning that designs a city with equal parts residences, agriculture, and industry.
My name is Nadia Nazir. I'm a sculptor, animator, musician, and teacher based in Baltimore, Maryland. The work I have on view in MATRICULTURE consists of various metal sculptures as well as 2 animations. The metal sculptures consist of braids, ironwork gates that reference homes of my family in different homelands, and different borders referencing bodies of water, including the Indian Ocean as well as the Chesapeake Bay, both lands in which I feel very tied to and pulled in between. The metal sits inside and outside the gallery, interacting with the walls, floors, and brick outside the space. The braids reference different bodies of water that are tied to the homelands that I am from, including Kerala in South India, as well as the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. Steel is used as a way to hold memory and traditions being passed down from generation to generation. How mothers in many different cultures and communities braid their daughters' hair. It's an act of tradition passed down from grandmother to daughter over many years. I think of the ways that my mother holds a lot of pain from colonization's impact on my people, how that pain has been transferred to me physically and emotionally, how those braids and how metal can hold that, and how it can be forgiving. These braids reference different bodies of water that border the lands that I'm from. These bodies of water include the Indian Ocean and the Chesapeake Bay. These 2 braids sit in reference to each other in the space, pointed in the same orientation that the lands sit on. One braid is inputted into the wall. The other sits on the floor, holding a gate from the home of my non-blood related grandmother from London, England, an area I see as the colonizers' land. These gates hold universal symbols that are seen all over the world in many different homes and structures, including ones that I've seen in Baltimore, Kerala, India, and London, England. The animations in the space consist of cyanotypes, a UV light process. Each frame is scanned into the animation. The short film Mama is about being tethered to my mother through the braids, thinking of the nostalgia of a home, these homes from my homeland, both of my parents' childhood family homes. The different window motifs, the colors of the walls, the ways that those spaces exist in my memory. How those spaces have been filled by my grandmother before and after she passed, and the ways in which I interact with my mother as I grow older and learn more about my mother as an immigrant in this country. Being a diaspora child makes me feel pulled in between these 2 lands. Both the animation and the sculptural work references both places physically, emotionally, and spiritually, with one connection being the mother that is the motherland. The metal instrument piece that stands outside of Tefra is Vada. It references the leaves on a banana tree, a tree that I see often in Kerala, India, and my homeland. as well as a tree that my mom has started growing outside of our home in Baltimore. The instrument is filled with strings of various American folk instruments, including guitar, banjo, mandolin, and bass. Viewers are invited to come and interact with this piece, thinking of rust as resiliency, the way that the steel rusts with the wind and the rain outside. How can we as a community play this instrument together and take care of it to prevent it from losing itself? How can strings be continuously played, and how can music bring us together as people? I think about the power and solidarity that folk music has brought towards different movements over time, how that has been used over centuries, and how it can be used now to bring people together in the face of injustice and oppression. As a musician and climate organizer, I'm always thinking of ways that art and music can bring people together, how we can build people power and remind ourselves why we fight for this land and why we fight for each other. Metal, and steel in particular, is seen as such an industrial material. In the ways that I work with metal in my sculpture, I'm trying to see how I can use metal in a tender way. The act of braiding steel has become such a meditative process for me. I hold the torch in my hand and I use all different parts of my body to braid and braid and braid. I bring it under and over instead of over and under, letting the heat travel through the braids, down the line, all three welded together, held tight in a vise. I become so locked in into the act of braiding. It helps me think about the physical nature of what I'm creating and also the physical burdens my mother has had to take on. I feel like I am putting my burden into the metal. I'm letting the metal and the steel carry that pain for me. That's one of my favorite things about steel. It holds memory in so many different ways. Once you bend it, you can't really unbend it or get a kink out of it. But at the same time, it's so very forgiving and can melt in your fingertips. This material warms my hands and it makes me feel connected to this land. And it reminds me that at the end of the day, that's where I'm from, that's where we're all from, and that's where we'll all go back.